Multiple people have been injured after Russia launched a massive overnight attack across Ukraine.
The aftermath of wildfires in California, United States, show more than 12,000 houses in ruins.
With a ceasefire deal imminent, the light at the end of the tunnel may be close for the families of hostages held in Gaza by Hamas.
Who's afraid of Donald Trump? New worldwide survey shows most disapproval in EU and UK.
Poland's presidential race officially begins with 11 candidates launching their bids for office in the May 18th first-round vote.
Eight people, including 2 children, were injured in a Russian strike on a multi-story residential building in Ukraine's Donetsk region on Wednesday morning. The strike was part of a massive overnight attack on Ukraine that targeted several regions, forcing the country to introduce preventive power cuts, according to the energy minister.
Сильный гул, не знаю, как это назвать, все тряслось. Здесь стекла не вылетели, только внизу там, то есть нас стекла не зацепили, слава богу. В детской комнате, конечно, все вылетело. Так же само в зале и в кухне.
One man was killed in Kharkiv and several people were also injured in Kherson. Moscow launched more than 40 missiles and 70 drones, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said. The attack comes a day after Ukraine launched what its military called its most massive attack on Russian military facilities. Ukrainian forces reportedly struck as deep as 1,100 kilometers inside Russia. Russia's Ministry of Defense vowed to retaliate, accusing Ukraine of firing multiple Western-made missiles. Wednesday's attack has further exacerbated the strain on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which Russian forces have persistently attacked during the almost 3-year war.
Authorities in the United States say they've begun recovery efforts after fires that have been burning homes and businesses in California. At least 25 people have been killed and thousands displaced from the fires, which have left more than 12,000 buildings destroyed. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass has cautioned residents that the emergency isn't over yet.
But while we're going through what I hope is the final hours of this emergency, it's also time to begin to talk about our recovery.
Meanwhile, Southern California residents continue to face dire new wildfire warnings and power shutoffs as fire-fueling winds blasted across the scarred landscape. Much of the area was under an elevated fire risk on Tuesday. Officials have said the wildfires, which started on January 7, might be the most expensive set of conflagrations in the U.S. history. Investigators say they are still trying to determine what sparked the wildfires.
The presidential race has officially begun in Poland, with the first round taking place on May 18th. 11 candidates have announced their run for the office. The Polish governing coalition relies heavily on the results of this election. The current president, Andrzej Duda, comes from the right-wing opposition Law and Justice Party and has the power to veto pieces of legislation proposed in parliament. The main issues of the campaign so far include abortion rights, civil partnerships, the rule of law, and security, the last of which is especially relevant in the context of the ongoing war in Ukraine. According to the latest polls, Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski is the current favorite to win. His greatest competitor is Karol Nawrocki, a candidate running in name as an independent, but who's endorsed by the Law and Justice Party and who currently heads the Polish Institute of National Remembrance. Polling in third place is Sławomir Mencen from the right-wing Konfederacja Party, but the race is expected to be a close competition between the two favorites. Trzaskowski's party, the Civic Coalition, is described as a centrist pro-European, whereas Nawrocki's Law and Justice Party is described as more skeptical of the European Union. In the last presidential elections, which took place in 2020, Trzaskowski narrowly lost to incumbent Andrzej Duda, who is no longer eligible to run due to term limits. That year, over 10 million Poles voted for each of the two candidates. Only Lech Wałęsa, the first president of Poland to be elected after the fall of communism, received a higher number of votes. If a majority of Poles do not vote for any of the candidates in the first round, a second round between the top two candidates will take place on the 1st of June.
The light at the end of the tunnel may be closed for the families of hostages held in Gaza by Hamas. Negotiations underway in Qatar could soon lead to the release of their loved ones and a ceasefire agreement. Gilad Korngold, whose son Tal is being held captive in Gaza, is in Brussels, waiting for the hostages to return before he can believe it.
I get a nephew who was killed in the war 2014 in the same day that was announced a ceasefire. So I know ceasefire, it's the last time to both party to bombing everything. So I'm not exciting now. I'm just wait to be if it's something real.
On his phone, Yotam scrolls through photos of his brother Nimrod, an Israeli soldier taken hostage by Hamas on October 7th. He hopes that Donald Trump's return to the White House will put an end to the war.
I think Trump has declared publicly that he wants peace in the Middle East, and I think he understands Bibi is stalling and the Israeli government intentionally prolonging the war. And I think he decided to put an end to it and tell our government enough is enough, you have to close the deal. And he wants to have a quiet front in the Middle East to focus on rebuilding America.
Udi Gorin is campaigning for the return of the body of his cousin Tal Haimi, who was killed on 7th October in kibbutz near Yitzhak and then taken by Hamas. He denounced the opposition of certain Israeli ministers to any prisoner exchange agreement.
I would only tell them they should be ashamed of themselves. It's, coincidentally somehow they consider themselves religious. Judaism is about compassion. Judaism is about being kind to others. Judaism is about community and about community reliance. And this is the complete opposite.
Hamas is still holding 94 hostages captured in Israel on October 7, 2023. At least 34 are dead, according to the Israeli government.
3, 2, 1. Ignition.
SpaceX launched a pair of lunar landers on Wednesday for two separate companies, the latest in a stream of private spacecraft aiming for the moon. The Tokyo-based iSpace plans to test potential food and water sources for future explorers, while Texas-based Firefly Aerospace is flying 10 experiments for NASA. The two shared the ride to save money but parted an hour into the flight to take separate routes to their shared destination.
We have spent the last 4 years
The European Union and the United Kingdom are the most skeptical about Donald Trump's return to the White House as US president. This is according to a survey of 24 countries carried out by the European Council on Foreign Relations. The historical European ally skepticism contrasts with the more positive opinion emerging elsewhere in the world. Historian Timothy Gartin explains why Europe is wary.
What do we have in common? We're both US allies who depend on the US for our security. So that's a very telling and dramatic finding. We already face a world of transactional great powers, Russia, China, India, Brazil, South Africa. And you know what? With Donald Trump, we see the United States, for the first time since 1945, again becoming a kind of transactional great power. That's why countries like China or Russia or India are quite relaxed about it, and we're definitely not.
For the historian, one of Europe's main challenges will be presenting a united front to the next US president, but also to the entire international stage in order to influence geopolitical decisions. According to the survey, the EU is considered by many citizens to be on par with the US and China.
We asked the question whether the EU can deal as an equal with the US and China. I expected most of the world to be skeptical. Actually, the world has quite a positive view. Majorities or pluralities say yes. So in a way, we Europeans don't have enough confidence in our own power, but of course it's potential power. We have to make it actual.
The authors of the new report say that the differences in how the US and Europe are seen show that the West is no longer a single, united geopolitical force. However, it remains the strongest international military alliance, according to political analysts.
At least 17 Palestinians were killed as Israeli airstrikes hit central Gaza. Gaza's health ministry says an attack on a house in Deir al-Balah killed 11 people whose bodies were brought to Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital. Another strike in the densely populated Nusayrat refugee camp killed 6 others and wounded 7 more. The Hamas-run health ministry says Israel's war on Gaza has killed more than 46,000 Palestinians in 15 months of fighting. The fresh attacks come as Israel and Hamas appear to be narrowing in on a ceasefire deal. The pair have been engaging in ceasefire talks brokered by the United States along with Qatar and Egypt. The deal, structured in 3 phases, would see the release of dozens of hostages held under Hamas captivity in Gaza, the release of 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israel, and weeks of peace. Hamas has accepted a draft agreement for a ceasefire in Gaza. Israeli officials say progress has been made, but details of the deal have not yet been finalized. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says there is hope the deal will close out this week.